And I believe we are live now. Welcome, listeners. Welcome, viewers. I do apologize that we're a little late this morning. We did have some technical issues, but I'm very excited to have one of my first female guest on this yet unnamed discussion program I'm doing on YouTube right now. We had the pleasure of meeting at I guess a political meetup in London not that long ago. And we connected on Facebook, and I've been fascinated with the work that she's been doing. And since I had a good conversation about masculinity, and it's been a topic that's come up, I thought it'd be good to hear from somebody, from the ladies, and some of the issues that are going on there, especially as it pertains to the UK. And with that, I have with me today my good friend Natty. I wish we could meet at another meeting. We have so much to discuss, Natty. I think this is the best we could do now. But introduce yourself to the people.
Okay, my name is Natty, real name Latoya. And I basically am part of Women Against Feminism. But I started out by working with Erin Pizzey. So I don't know if for those of you who don't know who Erin Pizzey is, I'll go into who she is in a minute. But basically, I'm kind of helping her develop a foundation for her work, which I can tell you guys about later. I also tweet at Ladies for Phillip Davies, and I have a Facebook page called Ladies for Phillip Davies. Phillip Davies is the only UK MP who has spoken out against feminism and is pro men's rights in terms of he wants men's issues discussed in Parliament, and he has managed to get a debate on International Men's Day about men's issues for the last 4 years. Was it 3? Anyway, the last few years. So that I kind of support Phillip Davies, a little bit of a troll, I guess, to the feminists who hate him so much. Again, if you don't know who he is, I'll explain a bit later. I live in London, and I'm married with 2 kids. My youngest is 7 months old, so yeah, I'm pretty busy.
Congratulations. I know having 2 young kids makes these types of sit downs that much more difficult, which is why
yes,
I value that you could give us that. We'll go as long as you need. If you got to cut short, I totally understand.
Oh, don't worry. I'm kind of a UK official affiliate of Honey Badger Radio.
Excellent.
Yeah. So they kind of would like me to be on their show a lot more, but I'm always flaking because of my kids, which is really irritating. And also, we used to have a group called the Liberty Bells, which was me and 3 other ladies. Unfortunately, we've disbanded, which I don't mind talking about, by the way, because it's interesting to do with some of the politics surrounding the gender war.
Absolutely.
But I'm still closely affiliated with Elizabeth, who's also a UK Honey Badger official member, I guess. So I kind of work with those guys too. I also try to support Mike Buchanan and Justice for Boys and the Women Who Love Them, Men and Boys, and the Women Who Love Them party. Elizabeth is the official communications director for them. I've got a couple of other projects that I'll tell you about, but yeah. That's me basically.
That's fantastic. And I mean, is it true that you have a Caribbean connection?
Oh, actually, this is completely off topic, but this is you'll find this interesting. Yes. I am half English and a quarter Jamaican.
Wonderful.
And a quarter Irish. Well, Northern Irish.
Northern Irish, yeah.
So I did my 23andMe test.
Oh, you did it? Did you do a video?
No, I'm gonna. I literally got the results yesterday.
Excellent.
And I am 77% European.
Right.
And 20% Sub-Saharan African.
There you go.
Right. But the biggest percentage in the African is Nigerian.
There you go.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I knew that my Jamaican family had a large percentage of Jamaican. Now, it's obviously there's only a few countries in Western Africa where the slaves came from.
Correct.
However, I just had a feeling. So it was interesting to have that confirmed. And there weren't really any surprises.
That's really cool. I think, as that's become more popular, some people are surprised, but I know you did have that connection. And a lot of my listeners and followers are in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago and such. So,
okay.
Yeah, having the Caribbean connection tends to pique their interest. Like, oh wow, that's really cool. You beat me by 4 points because I was 16% West African. Yeah.
Wait, am I blacker than you?
You're blacker than me.
No. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I did it twice. So I did it with myheritage.com, and then I took the data and I uploaded it to another one. So averaged out at about 16%, but very, very similar to your makeup. But I had more Latin American stuff as well from my Venezuelan mom and stuff. But yeah, let's get into it a little bit. I don't know if you saw the conversation I had with a friend of mine, Herbie. That video, ironically, when I tried to boost it on Google, was called "shocking content" and was was not allowed to be funded. But we had a quick discussion about the state of masculinity, especially today in the UK. And he talked about how he was raising his kids. He's a New Zealander. He's also an immigrant. He's Maori. He's like he is the character from Moana, right? Like he is looks like the demigod guy.
Does he look like the guy from Aquaman? What's his name?
What's his? I know the guy.
He's not Maori, but is he kind of like that?
Yeah, he's not as tall. He's a little more stumpy, but he definitely has the strength and stuff.
Yeah.
And we were talking about raising kids and masculinity, and then he brought in the aspect of the attacks he's seen on masculinity in the schooling system. So I kind of wanted to get your perspective. Like, obviously, you didn't come from this perspective of where you are now. Where did you start out in your perspective, and what was like your aha moment to think maybe I need to look at things a little differently?
Okay. So I think when I was younger, I wanted to be a journalist, and I come from quite a dysfunctional family, to put it mildly, to be honest, and so I don't really have positive role models on either side.
Okay.
So
I could relate.
Yeah, and so I think that naturally I was always kind of just a bit of a diplomat, a bit of a kind of being skeptical about the stories that people would say to me. So if someone said to me, my mum left my dad because of this reason, or that person is having domestic violence or whatever, I was always questioning, because I just knew that people generally used to feed other people bullshit. Yes. So I don't quite know exactly when that happened, but I was always naturally like that. And
skeptical, yeah.
About just about people's private lives, really. And then I think I became very skeptical because there was a lot of domestic violence in my family, and it was reciprocal. Right. And I observed that when coming from a working class background in a council estate, there's a lot of domestic violence going on, right? And I observed that a lot of women were just equally capable or equally culpable. Just, I don't know, you start to pick up on the narratives in society at a young age, and I'm not quite sure what age that was.
Sure.
But I remember thinking to myself, this doesn't feel right to me. Like, I was already pretty red-pilled about the domestic violence situation. I remember when I was a teenager, I had some friends I had a friend in one in particular, but more than one, but one in particular, she had a domestic violence relationship. And I knew that she was part of the problem in a big way. She wasn't necessarily violent back, but she was extremely emotionally manipulative. And I just remember pulling my hair out when I was like 14, 15, or, it's quite young, thinking, what is wrong with you people? I don't know. Yes.
Oh, have we lost you there? Looks like
journalist.
The connection. Okay, there you are. Yeah, the connection went dead for a second. It's fine. We're still with us.
I'm going to be.
So you're talking about pulling out your hair.
Yeah, no, I was saying that I had some friends in these situations who I couldn't understand why they would just so refuse to leave these guys or refuse to change their behavior. just because I've observed it in my environment, and I just observed that a lot of these women had benefits to staying. Yeah.
Right.
You know, whether it be financial or emotional, or just because they could control the man, you know. And so when I decided to be a journalist, and I thought, right, I'm going to go and do journalism and media at university, and then I ended up at not a very good university, and the course was mostly learning about Marxism and feminism, because there was a lot of cultural studies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to say to me that I don't understand feminist theory, then I spent 4 years writing essays about it. So I'm quite, you know,
Versed on.
I'm quite versed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that there's variety within the feminists, but
Yes.
they all have the same core belief. And so I just remember reading about patriarchy theory and thinking, this just doesn't seem right to me. This doesn't apply to real life. I don't know. And I still believe a lot of the myths about how the state of women in the past, you know, how they couldn't vote or whatever. But at the same time, I was very skeptical about this theory. And I went to male gaze theory. We studied male gaze theory in film studies. And I sat down and I just thought, well, all the girls that I know, including myself, are trying to get male attention. Why on earth are you trying to tell me that this is because men are somehow socializing women into it, or they don't like it, or you know, it's degrading and objectifying? It didn't make any sense to me. So I think that was my kind of light bulb moment at the age of 19. I'm not sure exactly the age.
Yeah.
I think it was the second year. And then so I left university calling myself an equalist.
Yeah,
I just made up a
one.
name. I was just like, no, I'm not a feminist, but I agree that women should have equal rights, because I still believed a lot of the myths. I didn't really look into the myths.
Right.
And I was just, I don't know, I just kind of started to see a lot of things happening in the media. And the main thing that I was really annoyed about was the fact that women were not being held to a good moral standard.
Right.
I didn't notice the masculinity problem at first. And then as time went on, I started to realize that actually we're not letting men be men, the men that they want to be. And in fact, ironically, we've gone from kind of having just a respect for masculinity and masculine values, but individuality within that, to now having a very narrow definition of what is masculine.
Right.
And which I think is quite linked to the rise of gender fluid and trans stuff as well.
All the social justice and identities.
Yeah.
I mean, just before we go off of that, how would you define masculinity, so the audience knows kind of where you think it is?
Okay, I would define masculinity as being responsible, having a high degree of personal responsibility, being a team player.
Yeah.
I would say courage is another value that men have more of than women. Therefore, I guess it's masculine. But I would say it's definitely a masculine trait. I would say that men are better at being objective and at solving problems. What else? What else is there?
I mean, you've touched on a lot there. I mean, I completely agree, because I take after Jack Donovan's book, The Ways of Men. So ironically, when I came out to the UK, it's a whole new life, and part of that whole new life was trying to become a better version of myself. Like, I wanted to get back in the gym. I wanted to, I got to make friends, because I didn't know that many people here. So I went to meetings and stuff like that, and I started reading. And the first question that I said, like, what do I want answered in my life is, well, what does it mean to be a man? And I mean, very similar to you, I had a very complicated relationship with my dad. So a lot of those things never really got sorted out in my life until much later. And I read his book, Jack Donovan's book, which was The Ways of Men. I can't remember who put me onto it. And he described it in terms of, the tribal nature of, early man. To be a man in it, you had to, be strong, as you say. You got to be able to protect the tribe. You got to be competent. So you must have the ability to fish or hunt, or, you got to add value. And you got to have honor in the tribe. The men have to respect you. And it's all centered around exactly what you said, taking responsibility for your tribe. And so you're spot on. I mean, you didn't have that definition, but it's so fascinating that just, through your understanding, you've come to those exact same points.
Yeah. And, as much as there's been a lot of research into the pride and the meaning that men get out of being a provider and protecting their tribe, whether it's their immediate family or extended. Now, I have to admit, I get a little bit anxious if I start talking about that kind of thing now, even though I'm someone who really wants men just to be masculine and women to be feminine. But at the same time, I don't like zoning in on this whole, you must be a provider and protect, because then that just starts going into male shaming territory. And that's not really what I'm about. I recognize that men and women are a team, and they each has their part to play. And sometimes a man might not be able to do certain things. That doesn't mean that they lose their respects, and that doesn't mean that they are not honored. They might be better at something else. So I recognize the variety. And also, I've been talking to the incel community a lot recently.
Really?
And and I would say that some of that stuff is quite raw to them, because obviously if they feel like, oh, I'm never going to be able to be a provider, whatever that means these days, then they don't feel like they're men, or they can be, right? Or they can be masculine. So that's why I get a bit like, oh, I don't want to zone in on that, even though I know that's important, because actually we've got research. So there's a guy called John Barry in the UK. He runs this thing called the God, I've forgotten the word. I've forgotten what it's called now. The Quality Network. He's based at University of London, and I'm forgetting what it's called now. Anyway,
we'll find it, and we'll put links below.
Right.
Yeah,
John Barry's his name anyway, and he has done lots of research and has found lots of research that other people have been doing and brought it all together in this network. And he has events quite routinely, and he's associated with Martin Daubney of the Men and Boys Coalition.
Yeah, I know that.
You've heard of. And they were talking about the role of being a provider and a protector, and how important and how integral that is to men in general, and how we are just eroding like the internal workings of men by saying to them they can't do that, or they should feel shame if they do that, or whatever, and removing that role from them. So I see the research and I see it in general, but I still feel a little bit kind of like, oh, just what do you think that's about? Because your interpretation of what I'm saying there, because it's just basically when we start, especially American women, I think UK women do this, but it's just in America, it's just way worse.
It's more.
Oh, yeah. And in the Black community as well, my God, they just like to screech a lot about, you must be the man, you must protect and provide, stun their fists on the table. And it's like, that's not how it works, is it? You're not supposed to be standing there demanding it in that way. A man is supposed to offer it voluntarily to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to. I spent some time in Kansas in the United States, and I lived with a great family. I stayed with them for a couple of months, And I used to see that like the wife would be like, well, if you were a real man, you know, you'd get this job or whatever. And I always remember the husband's response is like, woman, I'm a real man whether I get a job or not. Right?
Exactly. He's good. Good for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah,
Good
no,
for him.
he was spot on. And I think this is the amazing thing that's happening now. So I've given you the Jack Donovan kind of breakdown, and that is, yes, historic, you know, kind of like tribal hunter-gatherer.
Yeah.
And somebody called me on it, a good friend of mine. I might have him on a conversation later. He said, well, we don't live in those times anymore. So what does it mean today? Like I'm not fighting off the barbarians, at least I hope not.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, barbarians at the gate, you know.
Mm.
So he's like, you know, strength today, for instance, doesn't necessarily always mean being, you know, Mr. Olympia, right? Even in my conversation with Herbie, he actually said that strength for him today was standing your ground, right?
Yeah.
In terms of having an opinion, and even if the world was against you, no, you stand on your convictions, even if you think everybody else is wrong or they think you're wrong. And I thought that was so insightful that these traits, they do have a modern adaptation. Strength does not always look as physical as we know. Some men are never going to be, you know, Mr. Olympia and this kinds of stuff. Provision has changed tremendously. Like job security is a thing of the past. We know people are not going to be having, you know, this career. The company's not going to buy you a house and all this other kind of stuff. So it looks different today. And I mean that's the whole job sector. People have to be creative. You know, people are making money on YouTube and, you know, different types of things. And it tends to be more partnership at this because things are so expensive. It's now a dual role. The women tend to have to chip in, you know, to some degree.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Of course.
So you're saying, but I think the nuance there is that actually, what the feminists and the progressives and the mainstream culture is saying, they're saying that masculine men are the kind of caveman types, you know, the ones who protected their tribe. They have to be strong and repress their emotions and be stoic in all times and never show any vulnerability, whatever, which is all bullshit. But that is what's being promoted.
Correct.
But so ironically, I think what's happening now is men are saying, okay, the only way to be a man is to be like that. Everything else is to be like feminized.
Right.
Whereas in the past, we actually had respect for the different varieties of men, and men always had the core masculine values and they were always respected in that way. So if you think about, you know, kind of men who were in the performing arts in the past, you know, they were always straight men. Like, you know, they were always, you knew that they liked women, you knew that they expected respect, you knew that they were trying to be personally responsible and have integrity and stand their ground in their own way, but not, they were just varied. They were all different kinds of man. Whereas now we're being told, actually, in the past, the only type of man that was allowed was the strong, you know, caveman type who would tell a woman to shut up if she spoke without being spoken to, that kind of thing. That's not true at all.
Correct.
And so we've gone backwards. It's they're like, no, that's why I said before, that's why I think a lot of the gender bending is related, because people are saying, well, if I'm not like that, then I must be this. Whereas in the past it was, no, you're a man, but you're an individual too, so you've got all these different traits about you. So we've got this weird paradox going on, which isn't easy to see at first and to explain even, I think, to some people. And the other thing you just said about what were you just saying about
provision, and it's a joint role.
Yeah, the other thing is we also have been led to believe that women didn't really work.
Right.
That's something that I keep bringing up. So obviously you had the Industrial Revolution. Before then, we would have lived in extended family communities, more in small villages. There was a kind of collective responsibility that men and women together So women would be, you know, they'd be farmers in their homes, they'd be working the fields, they'd be doing hospitality type roles within the community, and not necessarily always being paid for it, but it was reciprocal. So, you know,
Correct.
right. And then after the Industrial Revolution, the nuclear family came about because people were moved from these extended community rural areas into cities and urban areas. And then actually more women were working then after that, and in paid roles, because
Yes.
suddenly these roles existed. So you had this kind of elite upper class who needed all this domestic staff. So all the poor women were doing those roles. And then you also had women working in coal mines and stuff, yeah, with their working class husbands, but not necessarily in the same roles. Now, I want to
Of
make it
course.
clear that the husbands were still the main breadwinners because they had the burden of the financial responsibility for the household, but the women did work. And we never had this kind of 1950s existence throughout history. It was literally after the Second World War when the middle class emerged. It was before that, but let's just say the peak of it was the 50s.
Yes.
Right. Suddenly women didn't have to. And actually a friend of mine who lives in the north of England, he lives in Barnsley, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said to me how that area was quite unique when the coal mines were around, because the men were being paid so much back in those days that the women didn't have to work, because they were in such demand, and obviously the supply meant that they could charge more money.
Right.
And he was saying how he was reading something about how the women were kind of like, you know, the kind of elite stay-at-home moms in the north of England in the working class community around everyone else who was still working in any kind of lower level working class type roles. So that's quite interesting. I'd like actually to go and have a look more into history in that specific area, just so I can discuss it in conversations like this a bit more. So that is a myth that a lot of people who don't look into it seem to have just gone with. You know, I'm not saying that women were out when they're like 9 months pregnant, just about to give birth, you know, working really hard in the coal mines with their husbands. I'm just saying that there's a bit of a shallow myth going on, and a lot of people have bought into it, because we've had such a kind of prosperous and privileged existence in the last 50 years, and so we just kind of go with it, really.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so if you ask the feminists about this, they will say that yes, women were working, the working class women, but they weren't being paid, so therefore they were oppressed and they were like slaves,
Right.
because, you know, they were being paid less than men, or not at all if it was a kind of reciprocal type role. And that's why we needed feminism. So they have an answer for that.
Well, they have an answer for everything these days, so
Yeah.
they're making some shit up as well.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with you, I mean, it's no secret that I used to be involved in like Christian ministry and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of behind me at this point.
Mm.
But even in the church, which is very kind of patriarchal and they like their traditions and stuff like that, they do understand that the economy and stuff like that is not the ideal, like how they'd want it. The man is the breadwinner and all this kind of stuff. And one guy, I can't remember who it was, and I always remembered this. He said, look, even if there are two people making money in the household, and even if the woman is making more money than the man, make sure that the man's money is at least buying the food for the family. Like, at least let him know that he is, you know, sustaining the family to give him that role.
Mm.
Right. And I thought that, you know, it was insightful. He actually did understand that that is an important character for a man, if he's married, if he's in a family, to at least be able to provide for his family.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was
exactly
really
what the
insightful.
research I was talking about earlier.
Correct.
Male Psychology Network, of course, it's the most simple name.
Right.
Yeah. They have. You should go and have a look at their site.
I will. Give me the links, and I will put them in the video below as well.
Okay, no worries. They have found that the psychological prospects and the role of, like you said, the man coming home with the bacon is extremely important to men. Whether they're more traditionally masculine or stereotypically masculine or not, it doesn't matter, right? You know, they could be a slim, athletic guy who's an actor who looks like a bit like a dandy, or they could be, you know, in the gym lifting weights. It doesn't matter. They still, if they're married and they have a family, that is really important to them. And I actually think that women know that
Yes.
deep down. And I think that, you know, women do want men to be able to do that deep down. They're just being bombarded with all this ridiculous programming.
The rhetoric, yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring up another point, though. I was watching an episode of Super Nanny the other day. Have you seen that before?
I've seen a couple episodes. I don't know the full premise of it, but yeah, do continue.
Right. And so this man they had 4 twins, young twins, 2 sets of twins. Ridiculous. Yeah, 4 kids.
Good job.
Yeah. And so the man was working at home in the morning with the 2 sets of twins, and then the wife was a teacher. She would come home early and then to take over. And obviously Super Nanny said, this is a ridiculous arrangement, you should get some help.
Right.
But the mother, the guy was saying, you know, it's her responsibility to look after the home and to clean up and to do the domestic chores, and I do everything else, you know, like providing and DIY or whatever.
Yeah.
And Super Nanny was like, look, I'm very much agree that you know, you want to feel like a man, and you want to provide, and you want to keep, you know, you want to have the dimorphic split of responsibilities. I understand that dynamic. However, this is practical real life. You can load a dishwasher sometimes, and I'm not going to sit there and say that you're going to be less of a man by doing that. Now, it's really interesting that there's a kind of weird thing with like Christians in America, and because it's a lot stronger in America than it is, say, in the UK. We don't have this. I don't know. We don't have this culture.
Yeah, the kind of zealot religious aspects of it.
No, I mean, obviously we've had classism, and we had the kind of aristocracy, and yeah, they were very rigid about their roles. But I don't know, there doesn't seem to have this kind of attitude where the guy's like, I can't do that or whatever.
Right.
And you know, so but I actually think that is also a result of feminism, because what that particular group in America, I think, noticed that the progressives were coming in, right, you know, after the 50s, and they were like, we need to just retreat, and we need to put a wall around us and just, you know, really, really make sure that everyone knows this is what we're about. So
Yes.
I actually think it's a response. I really don't think those men were that rigid, where they were like, oh, you know, I'm not going to be able to help my wife out by doing some washing up every now and then. I mean, I think men, this is what I'm going to say as well, but generally, even if a man is acting a bit silly about something, it doesn't take him very long to work out that he needs to change. Women, on the other hand, that's another conversation. but in general, you know, if you really chip them down, they're just like, okay, I can see that this is just a bit silly. Yeah, I can help with that, which might be part of the reason why we're in this mess, which is annoying. It's just kind of like using a man's strength against them.
Exactly. It's what you said. Like, we did come from a community-based family, right?
Yeah.
So extended family. So there was always help.
Yes.
Right. And some cultures have maintained that. Like, I know the East Indian culture in Trinidad and Tobago, and especially out in like India and these places, there is that kind of, you know, grandfather, father, son, and they're all living on the same street, and they're in each other's homes, and, you know, kids are all over the place. And in the West, we've lost that.
Yes.
And we're compensating for it the best way we know how, by as you say, the division of labor, trying to focus on what's best, and there's like almost like trade between the genders to bring balance. But the truth is, we had more help in the past. There was a tribe, it was a community. Even the church used to help out. We've kind of lost that pillar of faith in Europe, especially. So more and more pressure is coming down, and that's why you have to have these roles as being somewhat flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, as we say, the feminist thing is they've taken the worst aspects of it, and they've demonized the entire gender But before I say that, how do you define feminism before we get too crazy?
This
Yeah,
is
that's a
lovely
good question.
conversation.
Yeah.
This is just the favorite thing that they do when you have a discussion with them. They go, "Oh, not all feminism is the same. My feminism is not like that." Yada
Yes.
yada. My response is that feminism is defined as the belief that men have oppressed women and continue to do so, especially in the last 100 years.
Right. And that's kind of summed it up.
That's it. I mean, there's more to it, obviously.
Yeah, of course, of course.
There's other things I can say, obviously, but if that is the definition that I go by, and
Yes.
if I have conversations with anyone who are pro or not pro feminism, in the Women Against Feminism Facebook group, we very much for a while had lots of people arguing all the time, saying, "You're a feminist because you are okay with a woman doing this," or "You're a feminist because you're okay with a man doing that." And I was like, I understand where you're coming from, because like that behavior you're trying to point out is annoying and harmful to society, perhaps. But let's just be clear, that is not the definition of feminism, and we just need to just stop expanding definitions. That's what leftists have been doing for the last 50 years, and we've kind of got used to it, thinking we can use it, but we need to not do that.
I agree. I mean, they've done that with racism. They've done that with, they just keep shifting the meaning. So yeah, I mean, one of my early videos, and I think it was the first to be demonetized back when I was monetized. I got into that conversation about feminists hijacking this idea about equality to get everybody in that camp. So if you believe women need rights, you're a feminist. And I go through in the video and be like, no, that means you're an egalitarian, right? You can believe that, the genders in terms of the eyes of the law should be treated equally and not hold to feminist ideals. And you could be a contrarian, a complementarian, which, I would kind of fall into that category where I believe in the eyes of the law, we should be equal, but we complement each other. We are different, and those differences should be acknowledged and celebrated, and these types of things. So I wouldn't call myself a feminist, but yeah, as much as I might like certain policies to change, I know the reality that's not going to happen. And it's, I believe in giving people freedom. That's my libertarian streak, right? It's like, all right, people have agency. I'm going to trust them to do what's best for them.
Yes.
So the feminism thing, yeah, you've obviously got a lot of backlash from that. Could you give do you have like a high point of when you came out and said, I'm not agreeing with this? What happened? Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, I was quite preemptive about the backlash I might get. So look, I'm 32, right? And so I've now got 2 kids, and I'm married, and I got with my husband when I was 26, right?
Wonderful.
And so I am probably, in my peer group, I am probably the only person that has done that.
Yeah, the only person who's gotten married and had kids. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I have 2 friends. So just to give some context to you guys who are not from the UK,
we have a lot of single guys. So if you want to like tout where they could meet these wonderful women, I'm sure.
Well, you're not going to find them in London. Anyway. But basically, I'm from a council estate. I grew up in a multicultural area, and that basically means that there are 2 types of people. There were the girls who got pregnant very young for a council flat, and I was friends with 2 of them, and actually one kind of had one later, but she still did it for a council flat. The first one now has 3 kids, and the oldest one is I think she had him when she was 19. I can't remember exactly the age, but she was slightly older than me. And I knew various other girls that did that. So when I say I'm the only one in my peer group who did that, it doesn't mean that I didn't know people who didn't have kids already. But there's 2 distinct groups. There's the group who does that, and then there was the group who go off into the working world and I think we all went to university and all ended up in some kind of typically female type job, sales, teaching, that kind of thing.
Journalism.
I didn't really become a journalist. I became
Okay.
an event manager, but still, that's still pretty female. And the none of them have got married or had kids yet, and I don't
Wow.
I
Okay.
don't expect to see that for at least another 2 to 3 years.
Right.
I did have a couple of friends from university who were on my course who did have kids fairly soon after uni, but they were the exception
Right.
rather than the rule. So the reason I'm telling you this is because when you have kids, you and your friends are all single working professionals. Suddenly there's just a massive gap between you, and you don't have that much in common anymore. And if your life consisted of meeting up with them at the weekends, going out, that doesn't happen anymore. And I was an event manager, and I was in the kind of music events world, and I was kind of distancing myself from that world anyway. So I literally just kind of just said goodbye to people without even making. It's like I didn't stay in that peer group. I knew I had to leave that peer group for various reasons. But I did have a friend who was a friend I had for a very long time who I posted something on Facebook, and it was an article, I think it was The Guardian, and it was talking about how when a fat woman says she wants a tall man and how the
Right.
double standard between that. And my friend got very annoyed at me, and I was just like, "What's the problem? Like, who cares?" And she was just like, "Well, our feminist, because we both had a feminist friend who
Right.
lives in Canada now, and she apparently messaged my friend having a massive, complete breakdown, very triggered about the stuff I was saying, and I just replied to her, and I was just like, well, if she has a problem, she can talk to me.
Correct.
And she was like, yeah, but why are you showing this on Facebook? Why are you doing this? Why can't you just keep it to yourself? We can have a chat about it when we're drunk one time, whatever. And I was just like, I think you are annoyed about what I'm saying, that you don't really want to admit it. And she was just like, no, I don't care. I don't care that much. And I was just like, are you sure? Because the way you're reacting, you're really, really upset.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that happened to me. But I'm just saying that after, in terms of my peer group, I just kind of put a lot of space between me and them, and moved on. And also Brexit helped.
Did it?
Brexit was such a beautiful excuse just to be like, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Really?
Yeah, because well, you know, about Brexit, right? So
Yes,
obviously
yes.
there's two sides, and the Remainers abuse the Leavers, and
Right. Pretty
there you
much.
go. Yeah, and
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but in terms of a more public backlash, when I got together with the Liberty Bell, so there was me and three other ladies, and I decided that this lady's Phillip Davies thing was a good idea because Phillip Davies was getting so much abuse and being called misogynistic and everything by the media and other MPs and media pundits and stuff. I arranged an interview with him, and which is still up on our channel. And then also around the same time, we were kind of getting a bit of attention from some people, and there's two things to this. Basically, there's this the internet troll you
Right.
might have heard of called Claire Core.
The name rings a bell. I'm
Well,
not too familiar in the circles,
she
but
has a blog, and she's on social media all the time, and she believes in something called white Sharia. She basically wants a
really
Sharia law for Europeans. She
interesting.
wants
Okay.
women to be to have no voting rights and be under the control of men. She wants a patriarchy, but not the patriarchy that actually existed in the past, because the ones that feminists say existed didn't really exist.
Right.
She actually wants a different
A
version of that.
religious
Very
version.
religious, yeah.
Yeah.
She
Okay.
says that we can learn a lot from the Quran, but we don't necessarily need to be Muslim. Yeah, anyway, she's
Okay.
she's a little psychotic Chinese lady. I I know, no, because she will. The reason I say this is not so much her opinions;
Right.
it's more that she's a bully. Yeah,
Okay.
she literally is a bully. She will send you messages and just like say things to try and like psychologically manipulate you. Like, for example, she said to me, you guys are not going to be able to recruit any women to your cause, and that woman in your group, she hates you, that's why she said this, that kind of
Right.
thing. So she likes to do gaslighting.
Yeah.
She's quite sneaky. Anyway, I'm also sorry to go on, but this is important.
No, it's important. It's, yeah, obviously
I
this is important.
My granddad is actually a writer. Well, he's dead now, but he was a writer. He was an anarchist.
Right.
And you can find him on Wikipedia, and he's got an online archive of his work now. And I wanted to go to this particular meetup. It's like a free speech meetup, and it was called the Extremist Club.
Right.
And a lot of people that go there, it's run by like a kind of ethno-nationalist guy and an anarchist.
Right.
Now, they're not necessarily on the same page, but they used to run it together. But there were different types of people that went to that thing. And the guy that runs it, I wanted to talk to him about my granddad. And also Claire Core kept asking me to debate her. So I said to her, you're going to this meetup, right? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, why don't I just meet you in person? We can have a chat. And she was thoroughly unimpressive. She was just in person.
Really?
Speech to the meeting. Because what this event is you go and you do a speech and do a talk about something, and then they debate it. And she was just crap. And I just said to her, you should just stick to the internet because you're not very good.
Right.
And then she kind of didn't like me after that, obviously. And also there was a guy there that has a mate, and he started trying to abuse me online too.
Really?
He called me a mongrel, which was funny.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, after that event, an article appeared on Hope Not Hate, which is a Soros-funded anti-fascist organization. They're like the more civil, but also kind of break a lot of libel laws all the time group version of Antifa.
Right.
And they found out that Elizabeth Hobson had done a presentation about circumcision to a nationalist forum, which was linked to this event, and also that I went to the event. And maybe because what they do, they always go around following the dissidents they don't like, and then they do a weird article about them. So there is now an article, it's like the third line in Google, with my full name,
Really?
outing me as a associated with the far right.
I mean, I did
supported Phillip Davies. So what I'm saying is that being an anti-feminist is bad enough, but I'm also
considered
a
nationalist, far right extremist.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the dumbest. The dumbest thing that I've been seeing is this whole guilt by association nonsense.
Yeah, this article is a demonstration of guilt by association.
Yeah, it's like, but I mean, it's the whole 6 degrees of separation, right? So supposedly we're all connected to everybody by 6 degrees. And if you dig long enough, you're going to find out that, yeah, you can link yourself to anything and anybody, you know. And I don't understand the regressive left. I say the regressive left. And their just complete inability to reason and to just see the nonsense of these types of arguments. So I used to have a lot of debates. I was, debated in high school. When I got online, and I did religious debates when I was, in ministry and stuff. So you learn the arguments, right? You learn logical fallacies and these different types of things. And I always remembered that when they attack you personally, you've won. They've lost because they can't actually tackle the arguments.
No.
And as you've clearly seen, the voice of personal attacks has gotten louder and louder at everything in the outrage culture. But like you say, when you actually meet these people in person and you try to have a dialogue, it just goes to shit. It's like they can't actually substantiate anything.
No, not really.
Yeah, I mean, have you had a lot of personal encounters with I guess your opposition?
We did me and the Liberty Bells, when we were called that, we did a debate at Bath University with the Women's Equality Party.
Right.
And also, so it was organised by the Free Speech Society, Debating Society there, and there was a student there. He was what you would call a soy boy. Well, he said he was gender fluid, and he was very much this kind of, I'm on the fence. I just love everyone. Equality is brilliant, and that was all he really had to say.
Right.
The real debate happened between us and the feminists, and there was also another MP who wasn't part of the Women's Equality Party. Interestingly, throughout that whole debate, the Women's Equality Party had these three women sitting in the front, and there was this one very kind of aggressive masculine, well, sorry, I don't want to use masculine, that's not right, aggressive lesbian.
Okay.
Right. You see, even I sometimes have to check myself when I say things like that, because of the way that we've been programmed. It's very annoying. She was sitting there the whole time, and she was staring at me and trying to intimidate me like this,
like in your face.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been right in the belly of the beast with these people.
Wow.
I've also been on BBC Radio, Home Counties, BBC Three, a few other BBC Radio, because they basically, once they kind of have you down as someone to contact, they all just share their contact list. So I've been on debates on the radio numerous times with them. And we tried to, so just to go back to that debate, we lost.
Okay.
But what was interesting about that debate was that there were mostly women there, but there were 6 guys who abstained.
Really?
Yeah. They deliberately made a show of abstaining.
Really?
Yeah, and I spoke to one of them afterwards, and he said to me that he was too scared to go
vote against. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a feeling that was going to happen. So that was very interesting. But after that debate, and then we set up Ladies Phillip Davies, and then the snap election got called in 2017. And then the leader of the Women's Equality Party, Sophie Walker, who quit last week, by the way, she decided to run against Phillip Davies in his constituency. And this was a big publicity stunt for her, because obviously the Women's Equality Party, the feminist party, and Phillip Davies is, you know, a bit of an anti-feminist.
Yes.
So I was making a big deal out of that. I actually went up to Shipley, where his constituency is, and I went to the hustings, and I sat right in front of Sophie Walker on her table, and we had a debate. And I asked her if we could interview her, and she said no.
Not even question. Not even hiding it.
No, she was just like, oh, no. And then she was like, I'll think about it after the election. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. So, you know, these people, unless they think, you know, for example, she was on a talk show with Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
Now, for her, having such a big opportunity was a big deal. Yeah. So even though she got beat by Jordan Peterson, she could still spin that in some kind of victim narrative. But debating someone like me is not going to work out for her. And it's not really, in her mind, it's not worth her time.
Yeah, there's no upside for her to do that.
Upside.
Yeah. And in the political game, I could understand that. But yeah, it's she can't really win in that scenario.
Yeah, and you know, but she is also of the mindset of, I only talk to important people.
I know what you mean.
Which is, you know, that's fair enough. I am a nobody.
Not entirely, but I mean, we are coming up on an hour here. There were a couple of things you wanted.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I'm fine for the time. I know you've got a lot of things going on, so we could go on a little longer. But let's get into a couple of the things you might want to touch on So I mean, yeah, you talked about your experience with the Liberty Bells. You said that that's kind of disbanded at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. So basically, it's me and Elizabeth Hobson, who is Director of Communications at Justice for Men and Boys, another lady who runs a blog called Female Fed Up with Feminism. She's like me; she's got 2 young kids, so she's pretty busy. And then there's Paula Wright, who is an academic researcher, and she studies Darwinism, basically, and evolution, and she's pretty smart, and she does comedy as well, kind of.
Cool.
Yeah, she's actually was at Comedy Unleashed recently in London, which is probably the closest thing we have to free speech comedy in the UK.
Right.
And so I was keen to work with her. I didn't know her very well or any at all really before it was suggested to me by another girl in the group. But she is very much I guess you would say she's a centrist.
Okay.
And she doesn't like the MRA label and this idea about identity politics. So when we all joined up, she was like, look, I know that you and Elizabeth are very much involved in the men's rights movement, but that's not me. I'm anti-feminist, but I don't like the identity politics of being a men's rights activist, and I don't agree with some of the positions they have, etc. And I kind of discussed a few things about this with her, and so we all knew where we stood, and we had a project we were working on together. But as time went on, I had like a kind of internal conflict with someone within the men's rights community, and I told her about it. And she then was talking about how she was going to write an essay to reboot the gynocentric theory. I don't want to call it a theory, but
right.
he was calling it that. And the guy from AVFM, his name is Peter Wright. They're not related. He's the one who writes about gynocentrism all the time. He's the one who's pushed it and promoted it, and he's probably the reason why everyone on the internet knows about it.
Right. Yeah.
Him and A Voice for Men, right? And I mean, that is like the kind of one of the foundations of MGTOW, really. This understanding of what gynocentrism is.
Yeah.
So it's very influential online. And so she's got a bit of a bee in her bonnet about gynocentrism and the way that Peter Wright writes about it. And she started saying that it was becoming too social constructionist, which is basically the equivalent to patriarchy theory.
Right. But just for some people. So gynocentrism, again, is like almost female primacy. It's the elevation of the feminine in society. Is that how you define it?
Yeah. So we have a gynocentric bias as a species. Okay.
Right.
And we're always trying to protect women and children before men.
Yes.
Just because of the fact that women have more eggs and men have, women have less eggs and men have more sperm, and that just kind of makes
the rarity is value. So
yes, yeah, and that's fairly easy to understand. But then what Peter Wright talks about is then how it became propelled into society after chivalry was developed, and then it became more about the women's needs rather than the women and children, because before it was more child-centric, and then it became about the needs of women over men and at the expense of men. Now, Paula decided that she didn't like the way that Peter's discussing it, and they're both kind of academic types, and I was kind of like, look, you guys want to have this out, like, get on with it. Like, I'm a doer. I'm not an academic type, really. Yeah.
Good.
So that was my position. But then she just decided that I just said to her, write your essay, reboot what you want to say, make your arguments. And this caused all kind of eruptions in terms of personal relationships within this community. And she then decided to write lots of tweets saying, I'm going to do an expose about the toxic culture of MRAs, and stand by. I'm going to do that soon.
Wow. Okay.
And so we were just like, you've just spent like a year and a bit working with us, and now you're going to do this. Now you're going to just, kick us in the butt. I mean, why? So it was extremely disappointing. But the reason I'm happy to talk about it is because I did become public about it at the time.
Right.
But also, it's because even though a lot of the issues that the MRAs talk about has become widely understood in the conservative community, Tucker Carlson talks about it a lot now. When it's on Fox, you know that you've arrived, and and like, but it was these guys that were talking about it first, yeah. And I know shouldn't be that important, but it kind of is, like, and so she's like, oh, I don't really want to be associated with these people because, for whatever reason, she just kind of has her own a huge issue with Paul Elam. She doesn't like Paul Elam.
A voice for men.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the reason I'm talking about this is because there is a bit of an issue where you can have people who are anti-feminists, but they can't accept a lot of the arguments from the men's rights movement.
Yeah.
And they can't accept this position that men can be victims and that you need to have more compassion and empathy. Her response is, life is unfair, and therefore, you shouldn't try and play identity politics against feminists, and men should never do that.
Right.
That is the summary of her argument, really. And it just makes me really sad that someone who understands why feminism is bullshit in such a detailed and really intelligent way has a huge block inside.
Right.
Against taking the conversation a bit further about, empathy for men. So I don't know what you think about that, because I'm just saying that even in amongst the anti-feminist community, you have people that just they can't get with the program. They can't
unite behind like a common message and work together. And I mean that is the, I don't know what it is, the blight of political influence movements.
Yeah.
The feminists are doing the same thing. The feminists are fighting themselves, and the left is doing that.
Yeah, but they all agree that men oppressed women.
Right. Which was the point I was going to make. They have a unifying kind of ideology, right? So it's like different branches of the church. They could agree on Christ, for instance, or whatever the case might be. But because the men's rights movement, and you and I have kind of briefly discussed this, that we're seeing a split happen now. The MRAs are going one way. The MGTOW, we've seen the rise of the MGTOW. The incels are also kind of on the rise. And a lot of them are drawing from the same data, right? They're looking at
gynocentrism is the thing they all agree on.
The core, yes. Yeah. Right. And so I have an interview coming out with a gentleman from Trinidad. His name is Kirk Megu, and we got into this a little bit. And I talked about that. The knowledge of the intergender dynamics between men and women. So the red pill knowledge, right? So like the Rollo Tomasis and these guys, they're all drawing on this stuff: the female primacy, the the gender skews in the courts, the family courts, and all this stuff. And they come to different conclusions. So the MRAs are like, okay, well, we need to fight this legally. We need to get equality in the law and stuff like that. The MGTOWs look at it and say, well, it's not worth the squeeze, that we're just going to abandon it. And the incels basically price themselves out of the market entirely and say, well, we can't compete. But it all comes from that same base knowledge, which is good in the sense of that knowledge is getting out there, but it's really your response will kind of determine where you're going. And you said you've been talking to incels. I mean, would you say that's kind of an accurate account?
I would say pricing themselves out of the market is a fairly accurate summary of what they think, really. They just like, well, what's the point? And you know, sometimes even though they might talk on their forums and get annoyed and angry, sometimes generally they aren't trying.
Yeah.
So they have priced themselves out of the market. They're just kind of like, well, this is my lot, really. And you know, and like everyone else, they have good days and bad days, where some days they're like, oh well, maybe if this happened, or maybe if I did that, or you know, if Stacey would just look at me, or if I killed Chad or something.
Wow.
You know,
yeah.
no, not literally.
I know. Those are
like
those are UK idioms for characters. Chad and
yeah,
Stacey. Yeah.
yeah, just different. Like everyone else, they have good days and bad days. But I
Right.
would say the one thing they have in common is they've all just given up.
Right.
Yeah, but they're not being kind of empowering about it, even though, you know, some people will say things about certain types of MGTOW. Like a MGTOW as a concept is empowering,
Yes.
whereas the incel definition is just, well, it's just kind of, it's just sad.
It is. I mean, just for the order, like, so I could understand the MGTOW. They're like, okay, we're not in. Well, there's spectrums, of course. So there's some that date, you know, and stuff like that. They're just not going to get married, and then you got like the monks that go off into the jungle and live, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's all about you do you, like live your life, right? So travel, make money. You know, if you want to build your harem, go and sleep up with a whole bunch of women in Thailand, whatever. Just you live your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is the shift with the incels, is they're not living their life. They've almost kind of drifting, and they never kind of take the reins of their own life to be like, okay, well, at least let me have fun. Let me enjoy my own skin, kind of thing. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
Reasonably. I mean, I know two guys. So there is something I'm doing about incels at the moment, but I've been told that I'm not allowed to talk about it publicly.
Fair enough.
But there is two guys I know personally who describe themselves as incel. One of them has health conditions and he's disabled, and he is predicted not to live beyond a certain age.
Wow. Okay.
Now, even though he's in that situation and he doesn't really have a job, he, you know, he still goes out and socializes. He goes to community centers and stuff like that, and he's very active online. And he's really articulate, and he's not, sometimes he is feeling depressed, but when he's not depressed, he's a nice, engaging guy.
Right.
The other guy I know is very active in politics.
Right.
Okay, and he does actually have an active life. He just says that no girl wants him, and as much as how hard he tries, they're just not interested. Now, I'm more interested in him than the disabled guy, because the disabled guy is a guy who probably would have been an incel throughout our entire human existence, and
Right.
unfortunately, as much as I'd like to go, well, you could find a girlfriend one day, you're a great guy, I'm about the truth, and I just, you know,
it's
he
tough.
understands.
It's a tough sell.
Yeah, he understands. He is a tough sell. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The other guy, however, I would say he is a victim of our current parameters in society, because he actually said to me that the reason why he is a leftist is because all the girls are leftists.
Which is a big thing. You're right.
Right. I would say that he's probably like a kind of male feminist incel.
Wow.
Now, despite the fact that he's a male feminist, he's still an incel. Yeah.
She's still not going to sleep with you, bro.
Basically, yeah. And he still doesn't quite understand that that there's a unspoken knowledge about women that women don't like to express, unfortunately, which is that he kind of needs to just go and do his own thing, and then the women will come.
Yeah.
But then the other part of why incels are angry is because they realize that doing their own thing is now taking 10 years, whereas in the past it would have taken a few years.
Yeah.
So maybe in the past, if you left school when you were 18, by the 22, you're kind of a guy who's going to be able to get a wife.
Yeah.
Right.
You can afford a house.
In general.
And, yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But now you need to be 32.
Correct.
And so, you know, what did they do in those 10 years of wilderness?
Yeah, it's a tough spot. It's a tough sell.
So he understands that, and so that's why I'm saying there's this kind of, you know, oh, they're just guys in their basements playing games, not going out there into the world. And yeah, I think a lot of them are like that. But then there are guys that the percentage that I'm interested in talking to and just finding out about is the guys like him who are they're kind of aware of the situation. They know what they do. They know that they're just the women are not even blinking at them until they're like 30.
Right. I mean, we know about the sexual marketplace, and yes, some men, the advice for them is to wait, right? Because their value tends to increase later in life and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think they just resent that. Sure. They understand that. They resent it.
Yeah, you're quite right. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything specific? And then I have one question I wanted to kind of end with.
Okay.
No, why are you apologizing? It's your time. You got 2 kids.
Because I talk a lot, that's why.
No, it's great. I mean, we could probably do a couple more of these.
Yeah, we probably could. Yeah, we should. We should. I guess what I wanted to ask you what you thought about my project, just because, and maybe your viewers can write some comments as well. So I decided to set up a peer support group for women who are actively rejecting or wanting to reject feminism.
Excellent.
And so we're having our first meeting tomorrow, so I'm kind of anxious about that. When I say peer support group, I am not a mental health professional. I do have a little bit of training in therapy, being a therapist. However, I'm not a therapist. And a peer support group is self-run. The group agrees on the contract together about what it is that we're going to do. So it's all, you know, all voluntary based, and you need to be an active participant, and it's confidential. And the idea is that we meet up monthly and we explore what feminism is, how it's affected our lives, and how we can increase our empathy for men. And then the next stage could be how they could get involved politically if they want to. But for me, it's more important that they are looking to do that in their own personal lives in the ways that they can. So I've called it the Women's Liberation Network. And I think that some people got a bit confused that I've called it that. We have done that on purpose.
Is that the slavery connotation liberation kind of thing? Are you saying women are become a slave to the ideology? Is that why you named it that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also because the original feminist movement was called the Women's Liberation Movement.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I'm trying to reclaim the term liberation.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And, you know, if you're going to have a website called Women's Liberation Network, then I think it's going to be harder for little Google to hide it.
Which is a serious issue. Just my thoughts on that. Of course, I think that's a great idea. I think what you're addressing is really, it's really like an AA meeting, like an Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a detox from the feminist ideology.
That's exactly what I'm going for.
Yeah, I got that immediately, that you're trying to bring women together. It's like, you know, hi, my name is Claire. You know, I've given up my fertile years to pursue a career, and now this is what I'm going through. I'm lonely, and I've got like 12 cats, right?
Basically.
Right. I think that is so, and it's needed for men too. Don't get me wrong. I think
it does exist for men already.
There's a swing of movements right now, like No More Mr. Nice Guy. They meet in London and major city. So there's a lot of that kind of thing coming together. I definitely think you're on the right path. I like the idea of the political aspect, but as you say, that's kind of phase 2. It's the same thing kind of where I'm looking at it. We're pushing back on this culture that is regressive, destructive, and we need as many people speaking out as possible. You know, it's a part of the reason I do these podcasts. I'm also part of like another podcast, The Shit Lord Preachers, with my friend Amos. So the more people who are engaged, the more people who are getting the help they need to deprogram from this ridiculous matrix, you got my full support, right?
Okay.
So I wish you all the success. I mean, we'll put links below if, I mean, the event is tomorrow. I assume it's kind of sold out, but
Well, it's a small group, so it'll be
Okay.
10 people at the most, and I've got 8 people signed up.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, do you want to tell me where the people could sign up if they want to get in touch with you
So if
today?
you want to get in touch, then it's on meetup.com, and it's called Women's Liberation Network. And you just
And
type in Women's Liberation
what
Network.
location is it going to be?
In London.
In
And
London.
I won't be giving away the venue.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I have a quick question about Roosh.
Oh, okay.
Did you and him ever connect?
No, I
Finally,
don't
or
think I ever I didn't really make a serious attempt to connect with him.
okay. That's interesting because my friend Amos and myself are going to be on a podcast tomorrow with Rollo Tomasi, right? And I know Rollo also wants to talk to Roosh and stuff, but I know there was one point you were kind of trying to reach out to him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what was happening was I was an admin in Women Against Feminism group.
Yeah.
And I was in this situation where Women Against Feminism got started as a meme, 2014, right? And no one really kind of owned it.
Sure.
Right. So what happened was the lady that started it, she had a Facebook page, and then she started a kind of Tumblr website. And then people in the MRM got involved. And then someone bought the domain name.
Oh, okay.
And there's some random guy who I forget his name. I don't know him. And so what I'm trying to say is that when we started the Liberty Bells project, I was like, look, I'm trying to get involved with more women who are trying to be anti-feminist.
Yes.
So I'm gonna just get involved in this group. And that's why I became admin, and we started working on ways that we could try and create an organization to do with that. And then this group, because it's a Facebook group, you get lots of guys coming in. Oh, then they're not always guys because people are anonymous online, but
Sure.
a lot of them, let's say, were saying they were guys coming in, and they were just going, women's nature is, inherently evil, and they're all hypergamous, which is true, but they're all basically trying to destroy men's lives and blah blah blah. And Paul Elam calls that MGTOW.
Yeah.
Which is basically you're a MGTOW who never came out of Red Pill rage, and you just kind of stay there. So because we kept getting these guys, and there was also a group that were actually actively targeting us, which I'm not going to go into, like a very specific group of people. And a lot of them were coming in and talking about some of the stuff that Roosh talks about, yeah, where he says that women can never be anti-feminist.
Right.
All right. That kind of argument.
Yeah.
And there I am trying to create this community. I know it's on a Facebook group, so that's kind of hard, but we're trying to get a base. Yes. And then we get these constant people coming in, and we know that the rhetoric is coming from some specific people. So we had to just kind of get rid of them.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And so I was actively saying, look, I have to be the bad guy here, or the bad girl here. And I have to speak out and say, look, the women in this group, some of them really need to understand this stuff a bit better. They're not going to do that if you keep coming in and telling them how fucking horrible they are all the time. Right. Now, I don't want to protect them and say that they need to be wrapped in cotton wool, but at the same time, this is not helping. So it was just this impossible position to be in. And so I just had a fairly feminine response one day where I was just ranting about it.
Yeah.
And talking about how simplistic his argument was. And I know that he's more intelligent than that. And I know that he does this on purpose.
To get a reaction.
Which is why he's called Roosh the Douche. But, I really respect his work at the same time. So
I hear you.
Why are you mentioning that?
No, because I was watching it. I didn't know who Roosh was until you mentioned him, and it's like, oh, let's see who this guy is. And
okay.
So I really wanted to know what the outcome of that was. But I know we're pressing on time. I know you got the 2 little ones and the whole family and stuff. Natty, this was an absolute pleasure. Just tell the viewers and listeners how they can get in touch with you if they want more information. And of course, we will put all the links below for everything we discussed today.
Okay, so if you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, I'm at Ladies for PD, which is Ladies for Phillip Davies. I'm on a 30-day ban on Facebook at the moment. Yeah, typical. But I'm on meetup.com under Women's Liberation Network. I will be releasing a website soon called Women's Liberation Network, but that's incoming. So I guess Twitter would be the best way of getting in touch with me at the moment. But on Facebook, I also have a Ladies for Phillip Davies page. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with me about any of the stuff that I'm doing. I also have the Erin Pizzey Foundation page too. So generally people who go to the Erin Pizzey Foundation page are people that are looking for help with family court and domestic violence issues. Yes. And I usually send them to all the people I know that are advocates who help them. So if there are any issues to do with that are UK specific, I tend to know who the right people are. I am not the person who gives the advice, but I know who the right people are.
Fantastic. This has been an absolute pleasure. I think we could have probably gone on talking for like a good another hour at least.
I should warn you. We should do it again.
We will definitely do it again. And I mean, you've also got a YouTube channel. I don't know if that's active or not.
Yeah, so I do have I don't have an active YouTube channel, but I am on Honey Badger Radio sometimes, and when they do their live streams. Yeah. And if you want to watch the interview with Phillip Davies, it is on the Liberty Bells.
The Liberty Bells. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and to all our listeners and viewers. You know, this is all. I really enjoy these chats, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it too. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And yeah, if you disagree or you want to get some feedback, make sure and leave some comments below. I'm always engaged in the comments, and you know, our guests tend to get involved as well. So everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again probably next week. Take care, guys.
Take care. Thanks a lot.